Hey, I'm Joel. I'm going to do a tutorial on a pattern that is original to me. It's called the Funky Chicken. Super simple articulated pattern for basically a wide array of species, depending on how big you want to tie a fly. So let's start with the hook that I have in the vise here. So the hook is a Gamakatsu B10S in a size 1. That's going to be our rear kicker fly. The thread we're going to use is Dannevile's 210 Denier flat wax nylon. I like using this stuff for bigger streamers because it's tough. You can break it. It's not like a GSP, but it's very sturdy. So next we're going to apply a nice thread base. You'll notice I start right at the eye of the shank. It is a personal preference. You don't have to start there. You could start midway down the shank. I like the whole shank. I don't know. It's kind of my thing. So next we're going to put in some blood Maribou in Sculpin olive. One thing I like to do with the Maribou is I like to brush it out, because it gets matted down when they stitch it together for packaging. I used to take 2 or 3 feathers. Once you brush them out, you can even take a dubbing comb and a brush and brush them out. Then once you brush them out, they get a little bit more shape to them. Okay, make sure your tips line up. We're going to do 1, 2 loose wraps, get it in place, and then nice tight cinches here. You notice I didn't trim right behind where we tied it in. This is because we're going to bulk up. We can use the feathers to bulk up the body, and then we're just going to clean this up a little bit. Next, I like to put a little bit of flash. So this is some crystal flash. It's I believe it's Camo. We're just going to take a little bunch, and this is a trout streamer. So I'd like to put a little bit of flash in trout streamers, but I don't like to put too much. What I do, I like to pull the tips when I have it cut, and that way it's not even. It gives a more natural look. So we're just going to tie it flush on one side. We're going to cross over, pinch it off, tie it in on the other side. It should pretty well be even. If it's not even, then you can always just pull it and trim it, but I've done enough of these that they've got a good judgment of where they're at, and you'll get the hang of it. So next we're gonna tie in our body, and what we're gonna use is some polar chenille in olive brown. So right here, this is gonna give us a little bit of a body sparkle. I'm just going to tie this in. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just make sure it's tied in. I'm going to stop right about there. I'm kind of sweeping the fibers back as I'm palmering this forward, touching wraps. Now, if you want a little bit more body to this, you can tie in a piece of Sculpin first. And then, after you're done palmering this, then you can advance wrap the chenille, or sorry, the Sculpin. I'm just going to capture this. Okay, we captured this. Trim our tag end off. So now we got a little bit of flash in the body. That's perfect. Next, we're going to put some more Maribou in. So we want 1, 2. Trim the excess off, and we're going to use the rotary feature on our vise. Turn the kicker fly upside down. We're going to take another piece of Maribou. This time we're going to choke up a little bit on the feather, because we don't want too much of that bottom feather to cover up the shank of the hook. You want a little bit to get the body. One, two, let me cinch. Next, what I like to put in as a feature here is some pumpkin green orange silly legs. Pretty sweet. So what we're going to do, we're going to take 2 of these. And we're going to put them in, like I call it, slingshotting. And then we wrap this up. take 2 for the other side. Then we just clean that up just a little bit. Now, you don't have to worry too much about making the front of this fly super pretty, because we're going to have materials from the front fly. Cleaned it up. Those silly legs are getting in the way here. So we're going to whip finish. Nice and snug. Trim that off. And we're going to take some Loon UV Clear fly finisher, and we're just going to put it on the going to put it on the head of the thread here. And on the bottom. Make sure it's nice and coated. Just going to zap that with our torch. Now that's finished, what we're going to do, we're going to take our silly legs and clean these up. So we're going to peel them back. And we don't want these things to go too far back to the fly. So we're going to gather them both up at the top here. We're going to, without stretching them, we're going to pull them down. And we're going to cut them off appropriately to the size that we want them to be. These silly legs give some really good movement when the fly pauses or jerks. So now that we have the kicker fly into place, we're going to carry on with our front hook. And this is the same B10S Gamakatsu, but this is a 1/0. Now, if you're not fishing with sink tip, or you want something with a little bit more weight, feel free to wrap some lead-free or some weight, or use some dumbbell eyes for weighting, especially guys who are fishing like faster waters. Works really, really well. I'm not going to put any more weight onto this because I fish with a sink tip, and I find that sometimes too much weight is equals to a lot of snags. So okay, nice thread base here, and we're just gonna come up to about 3/4 of the shank. We're going to take some articulation wire. I prefer the non-coated because it's not as slippery. So we want to tie this in nice and snug. I like to go a little bit down the bend of the fly. Now, some people will say that's not a very good way to tie a fly. A show fly, I totally agree. We want to keep that thread wrap above the bend of the hook to make it look good. But I find if you come down a little bit, it'll actually help with the rear kicker fly not tangling up in the leader or into the front hook. So fishability and practicality for me in this pattern is key. So next we want to take some articulation beads, and what I use for articulation beads are 6mm Creek Candy Bead Company glass beads. They're fantastic. What I like about the glass beads, it gives it a good balance. And it also gives a little bit of clack. So when you're working that fly, the two glass beads are clacking together. So we go through them. And then in through the fly, the rear kicker fly. And then back through the beads. Snug this down. Now, you can just put a few loose wraps around here when you first secure that wire when you come back through. And then what you can do is that you can actually slide, you can adjust that rear loop here where the kicker fly connects. You can just slide that through to adjust how big of a loop you want. So if you want a little bit bigger loop here, that'll give your beads a little bit more clack. You'll also have a lot more free action in the rear kicker fly for that. But that's just a little tip. So we definitely want to reinforce right here, because if you catch by this rear kicker fly, that's exactly where most of the tension is going to happen, is right here. So we want to secure that spot the most. And feel free to use glue if you want some extra security. For like a trout streamer or a smaller fish, I'm not really too worried about it. My ESOX patterns, so pike, muskie, all that, you best believe I'm going to be using it. So even if you were doing like saltwater patterns for tarpon or snook or striped bass, I would definitely want to do that. So what we want to do is trim the tag ends off. And what I did, I bent the tabs back and then secured it, and then that'll actually give the wire a hook into the thread, so that rear thread's not gonna, or that rear wire's not gonna pull out. So what you want to do is you want, where you cut the wire off, you want to make really loose wraps until you get that covered up. I don't care if you tie them with GSP or not. Really strong stuff, you'll cut your wire off, or your thread off on the wire, sorry. So now that we have that secured, we're going to park our thread basically where the hook point, or sorry, the hook barb is. Basically, it's pretty close to rinse and repeat till we get to the head. So let's pick out some more Maribou here. So now we're cinching that down again. Then you can see we kind of covered up that ugly spot where the kicker flies tied in. But you don't want too much material there either. The problem with that is that you're going to create hindrance for the rear action of that fly, right? So make sure that you have ample room for that. We're going to take a little bit more of our crystal flash. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it right behind the, lost a couple pieces there, right behind where the Maribou stops. So you want a little bit past it. We'll take more of our chenille. You can always alternate colors here too. So how we put the bottom Maribou on, if you wanted to do like a traditional orange and, or sorry, olive and white, feel free to do so, or mix and match, whatever you want to do. You can even throw two or three colors in the tail, whatever you like. You can be creative with it. The beautiful thing about tying your own flies is that you can tie patterns that that are specifically good for the body of water that you want to fish. So I find this Sculpin olive is really, really good for browns where I fish. Browns and bull trout. And I imagine it'd be really good for smallmouth bass. It'll probably look like a small bass. So again, I'm not too fussy with it, but I like to pull the fibers back before winding, and that gives a nice sweeping look. And we're going to capture this. And again, let's put in some Maribou. And the two loose wraps, take your time and get the feather into position and then cinch down. Found a small piece of one here. That'll probably work if I can get it to lay down properly. Okay, next, let's put in more of our silly legs. Nice and snug in there. Perfect. Now we're on to building the head. This fly is looking good already. So we're going to use Senyo's laser dub. This is an olive. So we just take it out, pull it apart. Stack it nicely. Silly legs will get in the way, but you got to work around it. No big deal. Alright, let's trim up these silly legs. And now we're going to take more laser dub to finish off the head in a Sculpin olive. Just cleaning this up a bit. And a whip finish. Let's get a little bit better view of the head here for you folks. Okay, so now what we want to do is make sure that this is nice and secure here. Some more UV. Let's torch it. Now that's torched. What I like to do is take my toothbrush and blend the two head colors for dubbing. Next, the eyes. So for the eyes, we're going to use a 8.5mm in fish skull living eyes. This flavor is earth. It's nice, like a green tinge. Just a little trick that I do with my eyes, I put them on my thumb or right here on the hand, and then they're accessible. Because we're going to super glue these on. There we have it. Let's bring the light back a little bit. You guys can see it. There we have it, the funky chicken articulated. Great for multi-species. This one's going to slay some big trout for me. It's great. You can jerk it, strip it fast, pause it. It's going to just pulse with this beautiful array of laser dub and Maribou. So, as well as the silly legs. So thank you very much for watching. Take care.